Mona Lisa. There is a smile that has haunted humanity for over 500 years, an enigmatic curve of the lips that seems to whisper secrets, mocking time itself. This is the smile of the Mona Lisa, Leonardo da Vinci's most famous masterpiece, painted sometime between 1503 and 1506. But here's the mystery: who was she? Why did Leonardo, a man of infinite curiosity and restless invention, devote years of his life to this single portrait, returning to it again and again, as if it were an obsession he could never resolve? The Mona Lisa was born in Florence, in an age where art was not just beauty but power, a language of politics, wealth, and eternity. She is believed to be Lisa Gherardini, wife of a wealthy Florentine merchant, Francesco del Giocondo. Yet Leonardo's rendering goes far beyond the requirements of a commissioned portrait. He paints her not as a merchant's wife, but as an eternal figure, a woman caught between reality and dream, flesh and spirit. This was not just a likeness. It was a mystery coated in oil and wood. Leonardo's mind was restless as he worked. He had already abandoned countless projects, engineering marvels, anatomical studies, inventions ahead of their time. But the Mona Lisa held him. Day after day, he layered glazes with his revolutionary sfumato technique, softening lines and shadows until the contours seemed to dissolve like smoke. Her skin became luminous, almost breathing. The corners of her lips curve in two directions at once, smiling yet not smiling. The eyes follow the viewer with an unsettling presence, both intimate and distant. No one had ever painted like this before. Behind her rises an otherworldly landscape, winding rivers, jagged mountains, roads that lead nowhere. It is both a real and imaginary world, suggesting nature as vast, eternal, indifferent to human life. Lisa sits between us and this infinite expanse, her calm serenity confronting the chaos of existence. Was Leonardo projecting his own mind onto her, the restless dreamer who dissected cadavers, sketched war machines, studied flight, and sought the face of God in geometry? And then there is the smile. Psychologists, scientists, and art historians have tried to decode it for centuries. It changes with every glance, warm, mocking, mysterious, sorrowful. Some say it reflects Leonardo's fascination with human anatomy and emotion, his attempt to capture the very essence of life in paint. Others whisper that it was a mirror of his own inner turmoil, the impossible balance between joy and melancholy. When he finished, or perhaps when he abandoned, the painting, Leonardo never delivered it to the Giocondo family. He carried it with him everywhere, to Milan, to Rome, and finally to France, where it would remain until his death in 1519. Perhaps he could never part with her. Perhaps he knew he had painted not just a woman, but an eternal riddle. The Mona Lisa's reception was slow. For centuries she was admired by artists, copied, studied, but it was not until the 19th century that she became a global icon. And then, in 1911, something happened that transformed her forever. She was stolen from the Louvre by an Italian nationalist who believed she belonged in Florence. For 2 years she vanished, her absence only amplifying her legend. When she was finally recovered, she had become the most famous painting in the world. Today millions of eyes meet hers in the Louvre each year. And each person carries away a different Mona Lisa. That is her genius. She is not one thing but many, a reflection of our own emotions, our own mysteries. Leonardo once said that art is never finished, only abandoned. The Mona Lisa is his eternal abandonment, a work that refuses to end, living on in every gaze, every whisper, every lingering thought. In her smile there is infinity. In her eyes there is the mirror of time. And in her silence, there is Leonardo himself, still asking questions we can never fully answer. The Last Supper, 1495 to 1498. They say that silence has a sound. And in the refectory of Santa Maria del Grazie in Milan, silence hangs like a ghost above one of the most haunting images in human history, the Last Supper. A single moment, frozen in paint, where betrayal, faith, and destiny collide. Leonardo da Vinci was not merely painting a biblical story. He was dissecting the human soul. It was the late 15th century, and Milan trembled under political turmoil, foreign invasions, and shifting alliances. Yet inside the convent walls, Leonardo poured his genius into a vision that would forever redefine sacred art. This was not a traditional depiction. Gone were the stiff, emotionless apostles of medieval frescoes. Instead, Leonardo imagined the instant Christ announces, "One of you will betray me." Chaos erupts around the table. Shock, rage, denial, and despair ripple through the apostles like a wave. Each face, each gesture becomes a mirror of human weakness and human faith. Leonardo's process was as obsessive as it was revolutionary. He refused the traditional fresco technique, too rigid, too fast, and instead layered tempera and oil onto dry plaster, allowing him to rework endlessly. But this choice was dangerous. Even as the masterpiece came alive, the technique doomed it to decay. Within years, the paint began to crumble, as fragile as memory itself. Look closer, notice the geometry. Christ is the calm center, forming a perfect triangle, arms spread in quiet resignation. Around him, the apostles cluster in groups of 3, each knot of figures a storm of emotion. Judas recoils into shadow, clutching his silver, a face carved in guilt and defiance. The light falls not from heaven, but through the real windows of the refectory, merging the sacred with the ordinary. Symbolism breathes in every detail. The bread and wine foreshadow the sacrifice to come. The spilled salt near Judas' hand, a sign of betrayal and ruin. The open doorway behind Christ is no accident. It is the passage from mortal suffering to divine eternity. Yet the creation was agony for Leonardo. Days would pass with him staring at the wall, brush untouched, consumed by the weight of the moment he sought to capture. Other days, he painted feverishly from dawn until night, refusing food or rest, as though the vision burned inside him and demanded release. When the work was unveiled, it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Monks sat in stunned silence. Visitors wept. This was no mere decoration for a convent dining hall. It was theater, psychology, and divine revelation on stone. Even centuries of decay, war, and neglect could not erase its power. Soldiers once used the refectory as a stable, bombs shattered the roof during World War II, yet the Last Supper endures, a ghostly, fragile miracle. Its legacy is immeasurable. Artists across Europe borrowed its composition. Writers and philosophers spoke of it as though it were scripture itself. And to this day, millions journey to that quiet refectory in Milan, not just to look at a painting, but to feel the echo of a human drama that is as eternal as betrayal and as sacred as forgiveness. Leonardo had captured not only Christ and his apostles. He had captured us all, our doubts, our fears, our fragile hope. The Last Supper is not about what happened long ago in Jerusalem. It is about the storm that still rages in every human heart when faced with truth. And so, beneath the silence of Santa Maria del Grazie, the painting whispers, "What would you have done? Would you have stood by him, or betrayed him?" The baptism of Christ. It begins not with Leonardo's triumph, but with his apprenticeship, an almost invisible hand painting in the shadows of another master. Florence, 1470s. The workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio buzzed with the noise of chisels, pigments, and restless students. Among them was a young Leonardo da Vinci, a boy whose gaze lingered on light itself as if he were already dissecting its secrets. Verrocchio was commissioned to paint the baptism of Christ, and Leonardo, still barely 20, was tasked with contributing small parts. But what emerged would forever alter the history of art. Imagine the moment. Verrocchio carefully sketched Christ standing in the Jordan River, John the Baptist pouring water over his bowed head. The composition was traditional, solemn, orderly. And then Leonardo was asked to paint one of the angels standing at Christ's side. He began quietly as if no one should notice. Yet with every brushstroke he poured not only skill but an almost mystical sensitivity into the figure. Leonardo's angel radiated softness, skin luminous as if woven from air, hair catching light with a golden shimmer, the delicate turn of the head alive with unspoken thought. Next to it, Verrocchio's figures looked rigid, earthbound, constrained by convention. Legend tells us that when Verrocchio saw the brilliance of his apprentice's angel, he was so overwhelmed that he vowed never to paint again. Whether true or not, the story reveals how shocking Leonardo's naturalism felt in contrast to everything that came before. Leonardo's contribution didn't stop with the angel. Scholars believe he also painted parts of the flowing water and the shimmering background landscape. Look closely, there, the rocks, the river, the delicate plants, nature rendered with an eye not just for beauty but for science. Leonardo had already begun his obsession with the living mechanics of the world. He wanted to paint truth, not symbol. And truth in his eyes was alive, dynamic, breathing. But the painting is more than just a historical curiosity. It is a collision of two worlds, Verrocchio's grounded piety and Leonardo's visionary realism. Christ stands at the center, a serene figure receiving divine grace, but it is Leonardo's angel, gazing with quiet awe, that steals the scene. It almost feels as though the angel sees more than the others, as though it alone understands the magnitude of the moment. The symbolism is profound. Baptism is a cleansing, a new beginning, a rebirth. Leonardo himself was experiencing such a moment, stepping out from the shadows of apprenticeship into the light of artistic destiny. The angel then is more than an angel. It is Leonardo himself, silently announcing his arrival to the world. In terms of technique, Leonardo's use of sfumato, soft transitions of tone, was still in its infancy but already remarkable. Where Verrocchio used clear outlines and sharp contrasts, Leonardo dissolved edges into mist, creating an illusion of flesh so convincing that it seemed to pulse with life. His angel appears to breathe, to think, to exist beyond the wooden panel. The social context adds another layer of drama. Florence in the 1470s was a crucible of genius. Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, Pagliuolo all working within steps of one another. But the city was also volatile, gripped by political intrigue and religious tensions. In that atmosphere, painting the sacred was not simply decoration. It was a statement of faith, power, and prestige. For Verrocchio the commission was prestige. For Leonardo it became prophecy. Reception of the painting at the time is hard to trace, but one thing is certain. Within years, Leonardo was no longer the apprentice. Patrons began to seek him directly. The angel had spoken for him. And across centuries, art historians continue to return to this single figure as the point where Leonardo da Vinci truly began. There is a haunting poetry in this. A young man not yet 30, leaves his fingerprint on a work that bears another master's name. His genius erupts quietly, almost secretly, in a single angel. And yet that angel eclipses everything else. Stand before the painting today and it is impossible not to feel the moment when art itself shifted. When the Renaissance became something deeper, something more human. Leonardo's angel does not simply adorn the scene. It whispers, the world has changed. A new eye has opened. And perhaps that is Leonardo's true baptism, not of water but of vision. The Lady with an Ermine. It begins not in the studio but in the court of Milan. The year is 1489. The air in Ludovico Sforza's palace is heavy with music, intrigue, and whispered scandals. Among the courtiers moves a young woman, Cecilia Gallerani, barely 16, but already famed for her wit, her poetry, and her intelligence. She is not of noble birth, yet she has captured the attention, and the heart, of the Duke of Milan himself. Into this charged atmosphere walks Leonardo da Vinci, carrying brushes, pigments, and an uncanny ability to reveal the soul on canvas. The commission was never public, never formal. Ludovico wanted Cecilia immortalized, but not as a mere mistress. She was to be transformed into an icon, a vision of grace and refinement that would veil scandal with beauty. And so Leonardo began. The process was long, intense. Leonardo was not a painter who worked quickly. He studied Cecilia as though she were a mystery to be solved, observing the smallest shift of expression, the tilt of her lips, the spark in her eyes. He was not painting her likeness, he was painting her mind. The composition itself was radical. Instead of the static, rigid portraits of the time, Leonardo turned Cecilia's body in a graceful twist, her head angled as though she had just heard something and was about to respond. It is a moment caught in motion, alive with anticipation. And then, the most startling detail, the animal cradled in her arms. An ermine. Sleek, white, muscular, its sharp head lifted with alertness. Cecilia holds it with surprising strength, as if the animal is both companion and symbol. Why an ermine? The question has haunted historians for centuries. Some say it was a symbol of Ludovico himself, who was nicknamed the White Ermine, in reference to purity and honor. Others suggest it reflects Cecilia's own virtue, for the ermine was believed to prefer death over soiling its white coat. Perhaps it was also Leonardo's sly metaphor, fusing animal instinct with human desire, purity with possession. Leonardo's technique here is astonishing. The soft modeling of Cecilia's face, achieved through his mastery of sfumato, gives her an almost breathing presence. Her skin glows with subtle gradations of light. The ermine, painted with taut energy, looks ready to leap from the frame. Even her sleeve, shimmering with embroidered detail, seems to ripple as though silk under candlelight. But it is her eyes, turned away from the viewer, directed into an unseen distance, that create the painting's spell. She looks toward something we cannot see, something beyond us, as though her mind is elsewhere, caught between thought and revelation. This was not just portraiture. This was psychological theater. Leonardo had captured not just Cecilia's beauty, but her inner life, her intelligence, her independence, her tension as the mistress of a powerful man in a court full of rivals. She was more than an ornament. She was an individual. The social context makes the painting even more daring. At the time, women were rarely portrayed as thinking beings. They were shown as symbols of fertility, virtue, or family honor. But Leonardo presents Cecilia as someone in motion, alive, engaged with the world. He gives her agency, intellect, even quiet defiance. For a young woman of illegitimate social standing, this was revolutionary. When the painting was first seen, it was whispered about, not displayed publicly. It could not be. It revealed too much: the Duke's relationship, Cecilia's status, the intimacy of their bond. For centuries, the painting slipped through obscurity, misattributed, misunderstood, even painted over. And yet it survived. Today, standing before it, one feels an almost unsettling intimacy. Cecilia does not meet our gaze, yet we feel she knows we are watching. The ermine tenses in her arms as if it too senses the scrutiny. The portrait breathes, whispers, resists silence. There is haunting poetry in its survival. Leonardo gave Cecilia a kind of immortality the Duke could never have promised. She lives, eternally young, her mind forever half-turned toward a secret moment, her story suspended in paint. The lady in the ermine. Innocence and desire. Beauty and power. Leonardo's brush transformed scandal into sublimity. And so the portrait endures, not as an image of possession, but as an eternal riddle. Who truly holds whom, the lady or the ermine? Cecilia or the Duke? Or perhaps, in the end, Leonardo holds them both forever within his vision. Madonna Litta, Madonna and the Child. The image seems gentle, almost ordinary at first glance, a mother cradling her child. But beneath this serene surface lies one of Leonardo da Vinci's most intimate, mysterious, and contested works. The Madonna Litta, painted around 1490, is not just a devotional image. It is a meditation on tenderness, sacrifice, and the fragile bond between divinity and humanity. The hook begins here, in the infant's hands. The Christ child does not clutch a toy or a flower but a breast. He suckles, eyes wide, his tiny fingers pressing against his mother's flesh. It is an image of raw humanity, startling in its directness. No other Renaissance artist dared to make the divine infant so utterly vulnerable, so earthly, so real. Leonardo, working in Milan at the court of Ludovico Sforza, was deeply occupied with exploring not just anatomy but emotion, how the human body reveals the soul. For him, the Madonna was not a remote, untouchable figure. She was a mother. And in this painting, he infused her with both divine dignity and human weariness. Mary's face is striking. Tilted down, her eyes lowered, she does not gaze at her son but into some quiet sorrow. Her lips are pursed, her expression heavy with contemplation. It is as though she already foresees his fate, the suffering and death awaiting him. This is no ordinary mother and child portrait. It is a prophecy hidden in tenderness. Leonardo's artistic process was meticulous. He used his signature sfumato technique to soften the contours of Mary's face, creating an ethereal glow that seems to dissolve into shadow. Her red and blue garments, symbols of earthly love and heavenly truth, are rendered with painstaking detail, yet they do not overpower her face. All attention is drawn to her eyes, her downcast lids, her silent grief. The child, in contrast, is full of restless energy. His body is squirming, twisting in her arms. His tiny shoulder strains forward, his mouth latches with urgency. Leonardo studied infants obsessively, sketching their movements, their gestures, their instinctive vitality. Here the Christ child is both divine and utterly human, hungry, impatient, alive. This juxtaposition of Mary's stillness and Christ's motion creates a dramatic tension. She knows. He does not. The background adds another layer of symbolism. Through the arched windows we see a distant landscape, rendered in Leonardo's characteristic atmospheric perspective. The hazy blues and grays suggest infinite space, a world beyond the figures, timeless and eternal. This was no accident. Leonardo often framed his Madonnas against vast, dreamlike landscapes, reinforcing the idea that these intimate scenes were also cosmic mysteries. The Madonna Litta also carries controversy. Some art historians debate whether the entire painting is truly by Leonardo. Certain elements, the tight handling of the drapery, the firmness of the lines, suggest that his pupil Giovanni Antonio Boltraffio may have contributed. Yet the soul of the painting, the mother's face, the child's restless vitality, bears Leonardo's unmistakable touch. If assistants worked on it, Leonardo's vision still dominates, as if his presence is woven into the very light of the painting. In historical context, the work resonated deeply with Renaissance viewers. Devotional images of the Madonna were everywhere, but Leonardo's intimacy shocked and moved in equal measure. This was not the distant Queen of Heaven. This was a woman holding her child to her breast as any mother would. The painting brought the divine into the domestic, reminding worshippers that Christ was both God and human flesh. The symbolism of breastfeeding cannot be overlooked. In Christian iconography, the Virgin's milk symbolized spiritual nourishment, the sustenance of faith itself. But Leonardo went further. He showed the act not as an abstract symbol but as living reality. The Christ child's hunger is immediate, almost desperate. The message is clear. Divinity does not exist in the clouds, but in the fragile, fleeting needs of human life. Reception of the painting has evolved over centuries. Originally housed in Milan, it became part of the Hermitage collection in Russia, where it remains today. For centuries, it has been venerated as one of the most moving portrayals of maternal love in Western art. Yet its quiet radicalism still lingers. Where others painted the Madonna as an ideal, Leonardo painted her as a mother who worries, who suffers, who knows too much. And so, when we stand before Madonna Litta, what do we see? Not just a sacred icon but a moment suspended in time, the pause between nurture and loss, between innocence and sacrifice. We see the mystery of love that protects yet cannot shield, that gives yet cannot keep. The mother's eyes, heavy with unspoken grief. The child's restless hunger, unaware of his destiny. The eternal landscape beyond, stretching into infinity. It is a scene both ordinary and cosmic, both tender and tragic. Leonardo da Vinci painted not just a mother and child, but the fragile balance of life itself. And so the Madonna Litta whispers across centuries, love is divine but it is never free from sorrow.